Okay, firstly, I'd just like to thank Shanna and the team for inviting us. So thank you in the name of Amnesty International. Shanna and his team over many years has been a great friend to Amnesty International, a great supporter, and an important source of information for us in our work on freedom of expression in Turkey. This is a very important meeting. I'm very glad to be here. Our Secretary General, Irene Khan, had hoped to come here and to present the statement herself, but unfortunately it wasn't possible, so she has asked me to present her statement to you today. So I would just like to read to you now the statement prepared by Irene Khan. The foundation of society governed with the consent of the people is that it respects ideas and opinions expressed by everyone, including those not in the majority or those who think differently. The unique characteristic of human beings is our ability to express ourselves across cultures, nationalities, and over time. Disagreements are best settled through arguments, not force. We know about our past because someone had recorded that past for posterity. Freedom of expression is the cornerstone of democratic societies that respect human rights. The freedom to speak was one of the four essential freedoms the US President Franklin Roosevelt highlighted in 1941 for a secure future world. The right was enshrined in the Universal Declaration on Human Rights and reaffirmed in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and then again in the ECHR. Brave individuals have gone to jail for expressing ideas the state finds subversive. They find creative and innovative ways of expressing themselves. It is here in Turkey that ideas are shared and exchanged. It is entirely appropriate that Turkey is the host for a serious discussion about freedom of expression. When unfettered, the imagination of a Turkish writer knows no barriers, and the world acknowledges that. The honours bestowed on Orhan Pamuk, Turkey's celebrated author, testify to that. And yet, Turkey's laws include Article 301 of its penal code, which outlaws expressions that challenge Turkish national identity. The Nobel laureate of 2006, Orhan Pamuk, was charged in 2005 for expressing his concern over massacres in Turkish history. While courts dismissed the case then, and the law has now been modified since, earlier in May, the Turkish Supreme Court in Ankara rejected the lower court's ruling, raising prospects of a fresh prosecution of Orhan Pamuk. Orhan Pamuk is not the only writer to be so challenged. Another novelist, Elif Shafak, was also prosecuted under the same law because of remarks made by one of her characters in her novel, The Bastard of Istanbul. More tragically, in 2007, the writer and activist Hrant Dink was assassinated after being convicted under Article 301. A champion of Armenian-Turkish reconciliation, Dink's assassination was followed by soul-searching within Turkey, but the law remains on the statute books. Although Turkey has undertaken many reforms as part of its plan to gain accession to the European Union, peaceful expression of opinion continues to be restricted in law and in practice. Lawyers, journalists, human rights defenders, and others from across the political spectrum have been harassed, threatened, unjustly prosecuted, and physically attacked. Continuing restrictions on freedom of expression have a negative effect on the development of a civil society and the public sphere, and have proved one of the most intractable obstacles to reform in Turkey in recent years. Restrictive legislation has restricted expression of peaceful dissenting opinion. The article used to prosecute authors like Mr. Pamuk and Ms. Shafak, Article 301, criminalizes the denigration of Turkishness. Some changes have indeed been made to the article last year, including replacing the word Turkishness with Turkish nation and requiring permission from the Justice Ministry for investigations under the article to be opened. But the article still represents an unacceptable limitation on the right to freedom of expression. In practice, the authorities have granted permission for some cases to be reopened. There are other articles in Turkish law which are applied arbitrarily to constrain the right to free expression. Beyond that law, there are other instances of human rights defenders facing legal action in connection with their peaceful activities, including for campaigning against compulsory military service and on lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender rights issues. Turkey also has to reckon with the charged and polarizing issues of headscarves. Some women wish to wear them to express their identity and as part of their religious and cultural preference. Other women do not wish to wear them, seeing the headscarf as a restraint imposed on them by religious leaders or men. Turkey has a ban which outlaws the wearing of headscarves by women in educational institutions. An attempt by the ruling AKP to lift the ban was overturned by the Constitutional Court. An issue such as wearing of headscarves by women and girls is an emotive one, particularly in the international climate after the attacks on September the 11th in the United States, and the increased focus countries have placed upon practices of minority faiths. The wearing of the scarf ultimately is an individual decision. No woman should be forced to wear it, no woman should be forced to discard it. Amnesty International has long held that issues such as Article 301 must remain in the international spotlight. And we believe other articles which unnecessarily restrict freedom of expression also require international attention. Beyond Turkey, freedom of expression remains under threat in the Black Sea region, the area on which this conference has focused. Amnesty International has chronicled the tragic saga in this region. In Russia, Stanislav Markelov, a lawyer and human rights defender, was shot dead in January together with journalist Anastasia Baburova in broad daylight in the center of Moscow. Markelov was the lawyer of the family of the Chechen woman Keda Kungaeva, who was abducted, raped and strangled to death in March 2000. He had received numerous death threats in connection with his work on this case. Human rights defender Lev Ponomareva was thrown to the ground and beaten by unknown assailants outside his house in March. Independent journalists in Azerbaijan have been attacked and some imprisoned for defamation. Staff members of Amnesty International continue to face obstruction in their legitimate work in and on Russia, including through being placed on a so-called special list which entailed additional checks when entering and leaving the country. We have also expressed fears regarding Kyrgyzstan, which has banned the outspoken advocate of human rights in Central Asia, the Russian human rights defender Vitaly Ponomarev, from entering the country for 5 years. He has published research casting doubt on the official version of events leading to the conviction of 32 people for allegedly organizing protests in the town of Nukat in the south of Kyrgyzstan. Last year, the Indian writer and activist Arundhati Roy spoke about Turkey's unfortunate history in a remarkable essay, Listening to Grasshoppers. She wrote of her friend, David Barsamian, whose mother told Miss Roy the story of what happened to her family in 1915. She recalls swarms of grasshoppers arriving in her village, Dubne, north of the historic city of Dikranaget, now Diyarbakir. The village elders were alarmed, she said, because they knew in their bones that the grasshoppers were a bad omen. They were right. The end came in a few months, when the wheat in the fields was ready for harvesting. Heinrich Heine once wrote, "Where they burn books, they will ultimately also burn people." In Dubne, first the grasshoppers came, then the soldiers came, and killed many. Miss Roy writes, Araksi and the other women in her family were deported. All of them perished except Araksi. She was the lone survivor. Her aunt Dink wanted to heal those wounds. He spoke for peace, and an assassin silenced him. Pamuk and Shafak raise uncomfortable questions about the past and the state. The state prosecutes them. Like all other societies, Turkey has a difficult past. Dealing with the past requires talking about it without fear. Recognizing, respecting, and protecting the freedom of expression is the first essential step in this regard. As experts meet in Turkey to explore freedom of expression, my fervent hope is that Turkey and other countries in the region remove the cobwebs enveloping the region, so that sunlight may fall unfiltered, casting light, so that the society can move on from the past. Thank you.